Don't make a sound, guys. Be very, very quiet. On your best behavior.
Yeah, the bagels are wonderful.
So is the learning.
There we go. All right. And here we are. Okay, we've been discussing until now the idea of Hanukkah. We began by focusing on the Talmud, who describes Hanukkah as 8 days. Thank you. Hanukkah, which is 8 days, similar to the festival of Sukkot, which we literally just finished 2 days ago, as being 7 plus the 8th day. The 8th day of the festival is called Shemini 8 Atzeres. That's the name of the holiday, but the holiday comes with a Shemini, with an 8. And so there is a discussion in the Talmud, how should a person light the menorah? Should it be from 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? Or should it be from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the way we do it today? First night 1, second night 2, and 8th night 8. That's a discussion between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai is of the opinion to do 8 and then go down 7, 6, 5. Beit Shammai is always looking for the potential, and the potential is on the first night there's 8 days left, so potentially it's 8. Beit Hillel is always focusing on the practical. On the first night, it's 1 day, so it's one night, one length of the menorah. Now, the Talmud asks, why would Beit Shammai suggest to go down? Going down is not a common thing. You usually go up, especially when it comes to holiness. In fact, Beit Hillel is the one who says that the reason why he wants everybody to light 1, then 2, then 3 is because you always go up. So why would Beit Shammai hold that you go down? His opinion is because you compare it to the biblical offering of bulls, which were offered during the festival of Sukkot. The festival of Sukkot, the first day, 13 bulls were offered, among other things, to the temple, to the Beis HaMikdash. And so the second day was 12 bulls, and the third day 11, and the fourth day 10, and the fifth day 9, the sixth day 8, and the seventh day 7, which the total amount is 70 bulls are offered. And so since we go downwards in the bulls that are offered on Sukkot, similarly for Hanukkah, the next holiday over, we should also go downward. That means 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. So the Rebbe asked the question, why would you compare these two? I understand that they're both 8 days. That's a good comparison, but why would they both be 8 days? What's the connection of number 8 to these two holidays, which are the only 2 holidays that contain 8 days, biblically or practically? Hanukkah is not a biblical holiday. Why would there be? What is the connection to number 8? And he started off by talking about the oil. The first thing that we talked about was oil. The oil, physical component of oil, is such that it does not mix with any other liquid. You try mixing oil with water and the oil rises to the top, always. It refuses to mix. That's the nature of oil. And so this is an indication in Hasidic teachings it calls oil wisdom, a euphemism for wisdom. What's wisdom? It is the highest or deepest element within a person. When a person has a dilemma, you have a problem, and you start thinking, let's just say a math problem, which we all obviously love. Everybody likes math. And we all like to figure out math problems. For some reason, people don't like math. You love math? I also do. It's very logical. It's just, it makes sense in every direction. The reason why people don't like it is because you got to use your mind in a certain way. You've got to keep things in mind. It's not an exploring type of activity. It's more of a thinking type of activity. It's a logical issue. So you got to use logic to understand it, to comprehend it. So when a person is presented with a logical, mathematical problem, if 2 plus 2 equals 4, then 14 plus 14 equals what? So whatever, you have to work it out. Or if you're given a riddle, 2 people on the bus, and then the next stop 5 people, and then, okay, so you have all these things. So what do? You start thinking. You scratch up your head, you lift up your head, your face, you close your eyes, you start concentrating, all of a sudden, got it! That flash is wisdom. Wisdom is based on 2 things. Watch this other room. Wisdom is based on 2 things. Number 1, it's based on a person's ability to think, to comprehend, and to tally in the mind. It's also based on accumulated wisdom, accumulated information within the person that makes the person wise from experience. That arrives to a person's mind in a flash. The next step, it's not really a step as in, okay, now what am I going to do? The next natural movement of a person is to understand, to comprehend it.
So that our knowledge is going to get you in focus.
Hello? The next step is to comprehend it, to understand it in its length, in its breadth, and in its depth. So you take this wisdom, okay, wait a minute, I have 5 plus 3 plus this, oh yeah, now I see, yeah. You had it, then you could explain it to yourself, now you've understood. Understanding something is not the wisdom. The wisdom comes and it goes. It's on top. It's always on top, and it always seems to be separated. It always seems to be the wisdom never comes down. It's the understanding of the wisdom. You brought the wisdom to a lower level in your mind once you understand it and explore it from all angles and from all areas. That's oil. Oil represents wisdom, chokhmah. It also represents the word Kodesh in Hebrew, like Shabbos Kodesh, the holy Shabbos. The word holy in Hebrew, by definition, means to be separated. Not separated as in, I don't want to have anything to do with you, but separated as in wisdom being separated. It's on top. The word holiness means that it's not the usual, the normal, the mundane. It's Kodesh. It is something that is transcendent. It's higher, like the oil that doesn't mix. It's always somehow rises to the top. It is that holiness that bothered the Greeks during the story of Hanukkah. Hanukkah, and if you notice, they didn't destroy the temple. They didn't even destroy the oil. They didn't have oil, not because they didn't have oil and they needed oil, so it took 8 days. That wasn't because they spilled the oil out. They defiled the oil. They broke the seals. That means when an oil is sealed in the temple, it meant that this now is pure. Nobody who is unclean, ritually unclean, touched it, and it's now sealed away so we can use it. The Greeks couldn't stand that, so they broke the seals. Not that they broke the vials or the jars or the cruises of oil. They left them there. They were just defiled. They were broken. The seal was broken. What did they try to accomplish? Their purpose and their focus was, what is this holiness all about? Judaism should be about eating bagels on Sunday and falafel on Monday and Israeli dances on Tuesday and speak Ivrit and say shalom and tikkun olam. That's Judaism. Why is Judaism? What's this godliness here? And we spoke a lot about this. Keeping kosher? Can you tell me the difference between a cow and a pig? In essence, I guess they have different tastes. I wouldn't know. But then one is an animal, the other one's an animal. What are you making a big fuss out of this? Okay, so you can't eat. Let's see. You can't eat a whitefish, but you can't eat a catfish. And the reason is, because God said so. And why did God say so? Because God says in the Torah, you are holy people, I want you to be holy, therefore don't eat this. Huh? Holy? What are you talking about? It's that kodesh, it's that oil, that wisdom that bothered them. This wasn't like Purim, where you had a Haman, a Haman, who tried to destroy the Jewish people, men, women, and children. Goodbye, he wants to annihilate everybody. All right, we've had plenty of those Hitlers. But this is actually a deeper, a spiritual problem, a spiritual Holocaust. We love you Jews. We even love your culture. We love that dancing. We love those bagels, and those latkes, and those kishkes, and those knedlach and karaplach. We love them. They taste good. Your Yiddish sounds wonderful. We'd love to learn some Yiddish and teach us some Israeli dances. That's great. But to come to shul on Rosh Hashanah, what are you, crazy? Fasting all day in Kippur? The sugar? What are you doing that for? What is all this all about? Let's go outside and have some fun in the Olympic Stadium. That's what Greece says. And the funny thing is, the whole holiday of Hanukkah is a spiritual holiday. It's the spirit over the might. It's the few over the many, the few who stuck to spirituality, who refused to back down. And the Jewish people were being overrun by this. It's hard to resist this. But the Talmud, in the volume that deals with Sukkah, which we again just finished, it tells of a group of Kohanim, a group of priests, a priestly family, who were penalized. And they had their lockers on a different section. This family was penalized because they were named, this family named themselves after a woman whose name was Bilgah. Whose name was Miriam, the daughter of a man by the name of Bilgah. And Bilgah was the head of this family. This woman, Miriam, got carried away with this Greek culture. And she went and married one of these Greek officers. And she accompanied her husband to Jerusalem when they were trying to bring an end to all this Jewish culture and Jewish religion. And she was there when they brought a pig into the temple to offer it on the altar, just to show that this is not a real, you can do anything you want. She was there when they broke the seals of the oil. She was with her husband. This is a Jewish girl now, a Yiddish girl. And then she came to the altar. And she took her shoe off and banged on the altar. And she said, "You wolf, wolf, how much longer are you going to eat up the money of the Jewish people?" What she was saying was, I know that people spend a lot of money buying animals to offer them to God, and where's God? God, people are suffering, the Jewish people are suffering, and you're not providing. So because she was so disrespectful to the altar, so they penalized the family. That's what the Talmud says regarding this family. And the Rebbe in 1974, on the 10th yahrzeit of his mother, he studied that Talmud who was teaching that Talmud among a lot of other things. He was strongly campaigning for women and girls to light Shabbos candles and Yom Tov candles, so they should bring light into the world. And so he was focusing on a woman in the Talmud. And he asked the question, he said, here's a woman who went away from Judaism, married a non-Jew, which is a big deal, and then came to the temple and accompanied these people who brought defilement, such a defilement, it led to a war and then to a holiday of Hanukkah. That's why we eat latkes on Hanukkah. And you're penalizing her for hitting the altar? That's the problem? Is that what you have a problem with? And the Rebbe broke down and he cried. And he said, you can't take a Jewish woman away from her Judaism. What she did and her actions that she took, the things that she did that sound outrageous, those are not even looked at. They're bothered about how she reacted to the altar. But in truth, she was 100% right. What's bothering a Jewish woman when she comes back home to her homeland? That Jewish people are still suffering. And 3 weeks later, a big major rabbi scholar was there present at this gathering, and he wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and he said, I don't understand why you would be looking for a merit for someone who the Talmud itself says that she was remembered in disgrace. And I'm not going to get into this was a long story, maybe for a different time, but basically the Rebbe was saying in public, on Simchas Torah, he said, this soul has been wandering for 2,500 years, and nobody has taken any initiative to help that soul back to its resting place. And I did that. That's basically what he was saying. To get into this, I would have to go completely off the subject. My point is, though, this is what was happening. Judaism was being threatened with assimilation and with intermarriage and with other factors that are not physically threatening. Physically threatening. You have a Hitler, you know, and you have to be careful, and that hopefully the whole world will turn against people like that. But spiritually, what Hitler hasn't done to us, we do it to ourselves. By apathy, by ignorance, not knowing, by not studying, by not paying attention, by not participating, by not following, by not being part of Judaism, and by allowing other things to take precedence to Judaism. Other factors that feel good or that may sound good, they look good, but they're not. They're not what Judaism is. That's what Hanukkah stands for. So this is where we are now in this discourse about when we read the prayer for Hanukkah. It says that this group of Gentiles came to the Jewish people. It started innocently enough to convince them, but it turned into a war because a band of you can call them zealots or ultra whatever terminology you like to use today, and they said, wait a minute, we're losing Judaism here. This is not Judaism. This is Greek. This is not Judaism. You can't put Greek into Judaism. You want Greek? I get it. They're very wise. A lot of them wrote lots of great books, and you can learn from them, but you can't be them if you're going to be Jewish. You're going to lose Judaism. And so they stood up, and it turned into a war. And it was more than one war. It was a major problem. There was a big front. That's not what we focus on Hanukkah, really. We focus on the miracle of the oil, and we'll talk about that as we move along over here. But in the meantime, their focus was to make you forget, as we say in the prayer. They wanted us to forget your Torah and your mitzvahs. And as we discussed last week, we said it to God. They were okay with honoring your parents, or with not stealing from someone, or with some nice things, but they didn't like the Shabbos. They didn't care for this stuff. The spiritual stuff in Judaism was not. They didn't want that. They wanted to take God out of the Torah, the godliness, the kodesh, the holiness, the oil. That's what they wanted to remove. The statutes. We actually studied this last week. I'm going to go through a little bit quicker just to put it back into context. Similarly, on page 38. Yeah, there we go. 38, 39.
38.
It's 38, 39 on the same. Similarly, with regard to mitzvot, of course means commandments, deeds, good deeds. The war of the Greeks was against the divinity of mitzvot, against the fact that mitzvot are the divine will. It wasn't against doing commandments, doing nice things. It was against doing godly things, divine things. Hence, this is a quote from the prayer that we say on Hanukkah, in the Amidah and in the benching and other places. Hence, to take them away from the statutes of your will, which is what we say to God as we pray, specifically statutes and specifically your will, which contains two interpretations, statutes and your will. Even the Greeks agreed to the testimonial and judicial mitzvot, since they are rational mitzvot. For that, we're going to have to turn to 59. Footnote 59 on the bottom. judicial laws, testimonies, and statutes. The 613 mitzvot of the Torah, the commandments of the Torah, are divided into three categories. Number one, judicial laws, or mishpatim in Hebrew. Mitzvot that are designed to protect and uphold a moral and righteous society, including punitive laws related to the courts and the prohibitions against idolatry, adultery, murder, theft, and blasphemy. These laws are so obvious and necessary for a healthy, functioning society that mankind would have established them even if the Torah would not have been given, God forbid. They are thus rational mitzvot in the sense that their need and function is overtly logical. In other words, don't steal, don't murder. You can't have a society that steals and murders. A society that's immoral is a society that's doomed to fail, because at some point everybody's just going to say, oh, it's mine, or I want it, I feel like it feels good for me, I will do it. So therefore, the Torah comes along and governs even the most basic, simple, obvious laws. Don't murder and don't steal. By the way, if you don't govern those, then you get, this is an extreme now, but then you get somebody like Adolf Hitler, who convinces his entire country that there is a human part of humanity that are vermin, and just like you destroy cockroaches, you destroy Jews in gas chambers. That's where it leads to, because that's not real murder. Taking mentally disabled people and murdering them, which is how the gas chamber started, well, that's a favor to society. These people are just a drag. They're bread eaters. What are they doing? They don't work and they don't produce anything, and therefore let's just empty out the mental hospitals, that's the first step they did in Germany. Oh, God forbid, don't hurt a cat. The strictest and most severe laws against cats and dogs in the history of humanity that we know was in Germany in 1939. But mental patients, who needs them? And then the same thing with Jews, who needs them? And then who needs the rest of the people that they didn't like? So if you don't have a law against don't murder, period, then you can take that to however far you want to go. So that's mishpatim, judicial laws that the Torah itself also governs. Those laws nobody should have a problem with. Next, testimonies. Here's where things get a little hairy. These are called edut in Hebrew. Mitzvot that bear testimony. That's the word edut. It's testimony to the wonders God has performed, such as Shabbat, which attests to God's creation of the world in 7 days. The festival, Pesach, which attests to the exodus from Egypt. Sukkot, which attests to the miraculous protection God afforded the children of Israel when they traveled in the desert. Or Shavuot, which attests to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and various other mitzvot like tefillin and mezuzah. Those are called testimonial commandments. While the testimony mitzvot are not so obvious and necessary to be inherently demanded by society, you don't have to have a day of rest. You don't have to. I mean, it's a good idea to do it, but it's not like don't steal. They are nonetheless rational in the sense that once they have been mandated by God, their purpose, i.e. what they signify and represent, can be logically understood. I get it. You want to sit in the sukkah because God protected the Jewish people 40 years in the desert. We want to experience that sort of protection or shelter, whatever. And so we to the booth, and it's actually quite nice. And Shabbos, it's nice. If you do it properly, it's beautiful. It's an island in time. The world doesn't exist. You do away with whatever it is outside of your immediate vicinity. It's wonderful. Having a bris, maybe that's not so wonderful, but that's understandable as well. It's a covenant. It's a permanent bond, connection. It's giving up something. All of that. Mezuzah, God's sanctuary, God's sanctuary protects us. We can explain it. It's explainable. It's understandable. It's logical, and it can be explained. Those are called edut, testimonial commandments that we have that we might not have thought about them before, but once we have them, they all make sense. The Torah explains them. They are logically brought down. The reasons are brought to us. Now we get to the most difficult ones, and those are statutes, or chukim, mitzvot that not only lack any apparent reason or significance, but moreover remain an enigma even after they have been commanded. These include the prohibitions against eating pork and wearing shatnez. Shatnez is any garment woven of wool and linen, which the Torah prohibits 3 different places. Don't do this. Wool and linen, what's bothering you, God? What's wrong? What's the problem here? Now, I could give you an explanation, and I can help you understand it, and it might even make sense, but at the end of the day, it's still an enigma. Like what? Like why? How? These are things that they're not logical necessarily. The mitzvah of chalitza, which frees the wife of a deceased, childless man from marrying his brother. The Torah says that if a man marries this woman and they don't have any children, and the man dies, so the oldest brother is required to marry this woman so that the name of the man should continue, and the name of the guy who died should be perpetuated. And the first child they have will be named after this guy. Now, what if the woman comes to court, to the Jewish Beth Din, and she says, I don't want to marry this guy? And the Torah doesn't force people to get married like that. It doesn't force the woman to get married. There are times when a man is forced to marry a woman, but there's never a time when a woman is forced to marry a man. And so she says, I don't want to marry him. So then there's a ceremony called chalitza. The word chalitza means to remove something that you're wearing. So what she does is, this is a very complicated ceremony, which is obviously quite rare anyway. A young man to die after just getting married without any children is not a usual thing. But anyway, part of the ceremony is for her to remove his shoe. She's got to actually untie his shoe, take it off. The guy that she is supposed to marry after, and she's supposed to spit on the floor in front of him and in front of the court and say, this is what should be done to the man who doesn't wish to build his brother's home or something. I'm sorry, if he doesn't want to marry her, that's the thing. She wants to marry him. If he doesn't want to marry her, and then she's free to marry anybody she wants. Today, if God forbid this kind of thing happens, it's very rare to happen, but if it does happen, it happened a couple of years ago in Israel. There was a guy who was in the army and got killed. And he had just gotten married, didn't have any children, his wife wasn't pregnant, didn't have any kids. And there was a chalitza ceremony. It was so unusual that they put it on YouTube. And anybody who'd never seen such a thing was mesmerized by the rules. I mean, I've studied these laws, but they are very arcane, unclear, and you can see even the rabbis are sort of struggling with this. It's an unusual thing.
If the older brother is married already.
Biblically, it's not a problem. They're married to women. So today there is never an opportunity to marry this woman, ever, because we don't marry to a second wife. And so it's always only chalitza, which therefore frees up this woman to marry whoever she wants, except for the relatives of this family. She can't marry any of the other brothers that she wants, unless the one brother says, I don't want. But today we don't, because there's only a chalitza, so the whole family is off. That's a statute. That's an unusual, and now I can explain it to you, and we can talk about it, and we can go through what the commentaries say. But in the end, there's always going to be a part of this which will be not understood. And why do we do it? Because God said, this is what I want you to do. There's always a part of the Torah that leaves everyone with the feeling that I understand most of it, but there's always going to be a part that I just won't understand. And it's like children. When we have children, and they want to know why, we may take the time to explain it to them. And when they want to know why again, we may have some patience left to explain to them one more time. But when they keep on asking why, and they may genuinely not understand what you're trying to say to them, we still will say, you just go and do it because I said so. Because mom knows best. Or That's what the way we're doing it here. And when you have your own house, you'll do it your way. My mother and my father said that to me, and I'm sure everyone's mom and dad said that to you, and I'm sure you said that to your children as well. That means that there's a certain part where someone who is on a lesser level than us, and children are less developed than us, can possibly, there's a possibility that they just don't have the intelligence, the logic, or the wherewithal, or the wisdom to understand what we want of them, or the benefit of what we are asking them to do, and therefore we tell them, we have to do it anyway. At one point we're going to say that, because then they may indeed not be capable of understanding it. And it's the same thing with the Torah. By definition, when God gives us the Torah, it is obvious that this is a godly mandate and a godly document. And if it's godly, then it's no wonder that human beings should have parts that are just not understandable. And God put these teases into the Torah to remind us that even when it comes to don't murder, it is not because it's logical, it's because I said so. And if that's the case, then you won't break that rule. There won't be a Robin Hood, because I said don't steal. And don't steal means don't take anything that belongs to anybody else, even if they won't miss it. Even if the poor, you think that the poor deserve it, and you're going to be the one to mete out this justice. That's the idea of the not logical things. And this is this chalitza stuff as well. Let's continue back on page 39, beneath the line, after the parentheses. The purification process of a leper. A leper is a person who has a skin disease, not the leprosy that we know today, but the biblical leprosy was a discoloration. It wasn't painful, it wasn't contagious. It was a discoloration of the skin, or sometimes the hair inside of a certain part of the skin, or on garments, or even on homes, on the walls of the home. That's a defunct disease that doesn't exist anymore. The Torah calls it a nega, a disease that is actually a spiritual disease, but manifests itself in the physical, doesn't exist anymore. And the purification of it is strange. And that is a statute. You sprinkle with water, it's got to bring 2 birds, and it's unusual, and the like. It is regarding this type of mitzvot that the verse states, "Guard my statutes, I am God. These are my statutes, and you have no right to ponder them," which is the Talmud says. My statutes, and as far as you're going to go, you're not going to end up anywhere logical. Because our minds are created by God, and therefore God's mind that is infinite versus our minds that may be very good. You may even have an Einstein, but there's always a limitation how far you can go. And God's mind is above that. So let's go back now into discussion. So we've got 3 categories of commandments. We've got judicial laws, we've got testimonial laws that make sense, and then we have statutes that, again, we can sit and talk about them, and we can explain it. I can explain kosher very, very well. I can tell you that a cow is a domestic animal and its tendencies are to be gentle and quiet. If you just leave them alone there, you leave them alone and they're going, whereas a pig digs into dirt and mud. And even though that's just on the external, but it's what you are, what you eat. We can go through this. Lobsters are... like overgrown cockroaches. Yeah. Catfish are scavengers, and you don't want it. And things that scavenge, that eat anything that comes along, there's a tendency to what? We can get into this. We can sit and we can talk. We can spend a Tuesday night spending an hour and a half, and we can discuss it and go through it, and we can ask questions and answer. Bottom line is, you're going to end up soon enough in a place where, yeah, but why? Just like a young kid will sooner or later not understand what you're trying to say. And therefore, you just have to say, because Daddy said so. Because I said so. So back into the second to last paragraph on page 38. And and we'll start again. Even the Greeks agreed to the testimonial and judicial mitzvot. Now that makes sense. Since they are rational mitzvot. Their entire battle was against the statute type mitzvot. Since they are fulfilled only because they are the divine will. Because God said so. That doesn't make necessarily sense. Eventually you're going to come to a point where there is no logic and you're going to have to say because God said so. If you read number 60, footnote number 60, so this is back in page 39, i.e. the Greeks were not bothered by Israel's fulfillment of rational mitzvot. They too could appreciate such laws. Rather, it was Israel's fulfillment of the statute-type mitzvot laws that have no rational basis, that so incensed them, as this represented the submission of the human mind to the will of a higher being. What's that? Doesn't make any sense. And you know what? It doesn't. It isn't logic. So that's one way of looking at these words that we say in the prayer. We say to God that they try to take them, the Jewish people, away from the statutes of your will. Statutes are not rational commandments of your will, but only because God wants them. So the Greeks tried to stop the Jewish people from performing the commandments that are based on your will, on divine. Last paragraph on page 38. A second, deeper explanation is that they desire to take them away from the statutes of your will, including all the mitzvot, even the testimonial and judicial mitzvot, as shall be explained in the following chapter. That means that they tried to take the Jewish people, based on the fact that some of the commandments are beyond logic, therefore the whole business was unacceptable to them. That means they did not want the Jewish people to fulfill don't steal because God said so. They wanted the Jewish people to fulfill don't steal because the human mind says so. Keep God out of all of your commandments, not just of your statutes where it's obviously bound to God's rationale or God's logic. And look at footnote number 61. Conversely, we can say that the Greeks would have theoretically agreed to the fulfillment of the statutes. They would have agreed to it on the grounds that it is intellectually compelling that there are things that transcend intellect. In other words, intellect will tell you that some people are smarter than others, more intellectual than others, more brilliant than others, and therefore they can understand it at least. So we understand that intellect itself has levels and has ways, and what Einstein can figure out in his mind in 5 minutes may take 5 years for someone else to do it, so therefore we just have to rely on people, intellectuals like that. But that's an intellectual argument, a humanity argument. Okay, so they would agree that you can do those commandments because after all there are logical things that are higher than logic, deeper logic, deeper intellect. Makes sense on a for deeper people, for higher people. Rather, the Greeks' opposition to even the rational mitzvot was that they not be fulfilled because they are your will or divine will. So it's a divine issue that they had. That was the problem. The intellect they were happy with, logic they were happy with. It was divinity that they weren't happy with. Page 40. Okay, that's where we start there. We have the sheet. Excuse me for 1 second.
Be careful.
No.
You can pass it down in the meantime.
If you will please pass these sheets down. we won't confuse. We won't be confused here, and we'll have some logic on this table.
Perhaps. I don't know how logic is.
All right, all right. The Rebbe now will enter into a whole discussion about commandments, mitzvahs. What are mitzvahs? Why do we do them? Why does God want us to do them? And so on. This is a very fascinating topic now about commandments. Number 4, chapter 4. We can understand this last point based on the following known idea. He's developing a theme that is not quite as well explained over there as it is over here from previous Rebbe's and from previous Kabbalistic and Hasidic masters. Even the testimonial and judicial mitzvot must be fulfilled primarily because they are the divine will, just like the statute type mitzvot. And in brief, if you look at footnote number 63, he briefly outlines the coming chapter. As the discourse will now explain, there are 2 reasons why all mitzvot should be fulfilled as if they are statutes, i.e. because God commanded, because God said so. Number 1, so that one may realize the lofty divine service of a servant who does exactly what he is told to do and does not have his own agenda. If you have your own agenda, then you're not quite fulfilling the will of your master. You're fulfilling your will. Now, what's wrong with that? We'll get into that. We'll talk about that. If there can be anything wrong with that, or something negative to that. What's wrong with adding your own flavor in it? And by the way, there is nothing wrong with that to a certain degree. When you're adding your own flavor means that now your tefillin are going to be yellow instead of black, or that your bagels will, God forbid, not be boiled, will only be baked. I mean, you can't be doing that. That's not a bagel, right? Things like that, you know. So once you start with your own business, it's like the story like the parable that is used about the guy who came in to a friend. He came to his next door neighbor. He says, "Can I please borrow a fork, a silver fork that you have? I have company and I'm missing 1 fork from my set." The guy says, "Oh, sure, no problem. I'm not using my forks tonight." Yeah. Next day he comes back with a whole bag of forks. And the guy says, "You only took 1 fork, what's this?" He says, "Oh, overnight, you didn't know your fork was pregnant. You gave birth to all these forks." The guy says, "Pregnant? What are you, sugar?" He says, No, really." So the guy thinks to himself, "If he's giving me silver forks, that's wonderful." So he takes the bag of forks. A week later he says, "I need a knife." Guy says, "Yeah, how many knives do you need? Quickly, no problem." He goes, gives him a knife, and sure enough, the next day he comes back with this big bag of knives. And he says it gave birth. And then the next day he came for a spoon. And it gave birth again somehow. This was a good deal. A week later he said, I need the whole set. I'm having a lot of people come over. And so he took the whole set. And then the next day he comes to the door and he says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, they all died." He said, and the guy says, "What are you, Miss Sugar? Forks and knives don't die." He says, "Oh, when they were pregnant, that you did accept? That when they gave birth, that you accepted, no problem. But when I said they died, then all of a sudden you have a problem with it, huh?" That's the parable that is used to explain that once you start meddling and adding forks and knives and spoons to your religious experiences, at the end of the day, everything dies and collapses. Because once you've gone over the border of where one can go, it's somebody wrote about this on the Good Shabbos email for Sukkot, not the one that I just sent out about light, but the one before that about beauty. That Sukkot is the only holiday that emphasizes the beautiful. When the Torah talks about the fruits that are supposed to be taken, the 4 kinds, it calls it a beautiful fruit. And from here we learn that the sukkah also has to be beautiful, which is why everybody decorates their sukkahs. You get those paper chains on the things, and fruits are hanging from the roof, and then people wait till January 14th, and on sale are all these lights and all this stuff, and then you come to our sukkah and there's nothing there. It's just walls. So yeah, we say we decorate our sukkah with our guests, and believe me, there's nothing more beautiful than our guests. So we were very pleased with our decorations. But bottom line is the walls are bare, and law says go and decorate them. So why don't we? And the real reason is because decoration, beauty comes from the Torah. Now, are you going to go to Walmart on January 10th and decide that those those green and red lights are for you? That's how you're going to decorate? Well, how about your 3-year-old coming home with a picture that you scribbled on, and that's a decoration because the kid feels that that's fine? Is that how you beautify the sukkah? Or should you put some plastic fruits on it because you can't afford to hang a real cluster of grapes, or you don't want to put apples up because you're afraid of the flies? So is your plastic nice and beautiful? Is beauty in the eye of the beholder? Or you can say, yes, of course, that's with my clothing, that's with my shoes, and that's with my table, and that's with my house. But when it comes to a mitzvah, who is to decide what real beauty is? And so we leave the walls and we let people beautify the sukkah. That's beautiful. Because once you open up the bag, there's no end to what people can do. It's like in Israel on Purim, you have these people. Today it's different because of the internet. 20 years ago, you would have found lots of people walking around in Santa suits on Purim, not because they were trying to get dressed up as Santa Claus, because it was being sold for $3. You had a whole costume. They didn't know in Israel what red and white fat man is. There
is no one like that.
There's what?
There is no one like that.
I understand, but it's not necessarily
Yeah,
a
but
Jewish holiday. Purim seems to be. I understand if you're in a play and you got to portray this guy, I get it. But if you're trying to dress up for a Jewish day, you're trying to beautify the day by what? So, where are the limitations? Where do you draw the line? What about those forks? Okay, so let's see. So in footnote 63, so one idea of fulfilling God's commandments is that you should realize that we're like a servant, and we should do what God wants us to do without any personal refinements, pregnancies or deaths in the cutlery type of thing. Or number 2, because all mitzvot are expressions of God's will. His desire lies equally at the core of every mitzvah. The reason why you do the mitzvah is, first of all, because you do it because we're told to do it, and therefore we should do it the way God wants us to do it. But secondly, more precious way of looking at a mitzvah is because God says, this is how I want you to do something. It's what we discussed last week. So when you come home and your wife says, take out the garbage, there's a lot of women here. When your husband says, I like the meat.
Sorry, wife is here.
Last week she wasn't around. Could have said anything I wanted. So when the husband says, this is how I like the meat, and so she makes it with, I like it to be with a little coating on top, and if you fry it in this type of oil for this length of time, put this amount of garlic powder, this amount, that's how I like it. So she puts ketchup and mayonnaise and then throws it into the oven, and then, what did you do to the meat? Oh, this is how I like it. My father even said he likes it this way. It's nice. I'm sure it must be good, but, that's not what I asked for. But I bought you your favorite steak, and I bought your favorite CD yesterday. Thank you, but that's not what I asked. Last week I gave you the example of coming home and your wife says, take out the garbage. And you say, I just bought you a $5,000 ring. Here, honey, here's the ring. And it looks so exquisite and beautiful and perfect and all of that. And then she says, the garbage. But I bought you the ring. Thank you, but my will right now is, if you want to make me happy, it's very simple. Not 5,000, not 500, not 5, not even 5 cents. Just take out the garbage. And God says, I want you to put on tefillin. I want you to have mezuzah. I want you to keep kosher. I want you to fast on Yom Kippur. They're all from the same God. Some of them are bigger. Some of them are. No, none of them are. They're from the same God. Now you can say, well, the punishment for doing this or not doing that is much more severe when it comes to the big ones than it comes to the little ones. You can look at it from that perspective, and that's legitimate as well. But you can also look at it from the perspective of God wants us to do 613 things in order to live our lives. That's what he asks for. That's what he wants. So you can say, but I'm doing all of it. That's good, fine. But when you look in the will of the person who wants us to do it, or in this case, the entity, God, the divinity that wants us to do it, that's already digging into, but I bought you the ring, I bought your favorite CD. Thank you, but that's not what I asked you to do. All right, so we will get into this next week. The idea of doing something because God wants us to do them, and the divine will that comes along with this, and what exactly is this divine will, and what does it mean to us, and why should we be like a servant, serve God, all of this, and how they are manifest through the commandments, through the mitzvahs that God asks us to do, will be discussed next week, in addition to the fact that God's will, what is his will here? What he wants us to want, and what happens as a result of this? Why is that so important? And shouldn't we pay more attention to study, let's say, rather than doing, rather than the action of the commandments? All of that